morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, welcome. And thank you so very much for being with us. We know your time is precious and this is going to be very well spent time. Lean in, listen in, pay attention, be present, whatever else that you're doing, please stop. I think it's going to be worth it, but I want you to agree with me at the end. Today we have a very special interview with an extraordinary human. His name is Christopher Jarvis. And just like his really good friend, David Meltzer, who he introduced me to and I spoke to a few times, it was Brett D. Scott, who some of you know in our Positive Prime community, who introduced me to both Chris and also to David. Chris, you have a new book coming out and it is not only beautiful, but profound. And I'd like to dive into what, why, when, where, and how. And let's encourage anybody who's listening to this to first and foremost buy the book and read it. And then secondly, watch your special Positive Prime that reinforces the main messages of the book so people can adopt, apply, implement, live it, and be the wisdom that you share, which, like most of us, have been forged by these incredible mistakes and insights from your life's journey. So like you, I have been a management consultant advising some of the world's most powerful and influential boards of directors, participants, senior executives, and so forth. And your advice or your consultations don't come cheap. So this hour with you is really precious. I mean, valuable in the true sense. But you and I both know, and maybe even someone like Steve Jobs, who with all of his talent and all of his access to resources, as well as his money, still couldn't save his own life. Very much like both of your parents passing from incurable cancer. I know that you've had to dig deep, and I want to hand it over to you and allow everybody to listen into some of the questions that we might be having. I want you to share your story, but in doing so, Chris, can you give us a clue that if you're knocked down and you're not knocked out, and given that I've died 6 times and I live now because of a pacemaker, I have a few very rare perceptions and assumptions and expectations of the getting back up. How long can you stay down when you've been kicked and punched, and where do we find the spark that gets us to get up again and continue on? And how long does the up curve take until we start to see the evidence that we're back on track, or maybe a completely different track? And we're going to lead into your paths analogy. All right. So is that that's a good map for where we're going?
So you want me to be insightful, life-changing, soul-saving, and somehow enthusiastic and concise. So that's all you're asking.
Yeah,
so I think it's a very simple list. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Human as well, which I know you can do, right?
The human part I have down, I think. But the
thank you.
Yeah, you asked a lot of questions in there. It's kind of the you can ask the genie one wish, and Kim wished for 9 more wishes. So here I am with 10 questions to answer in one. God, where is the journey? The journey, everybody had life stuff growing up, and I had my challenges too, but I was gifted in math, and I just had this mathematician, actuary, solve patterns, Rain Man kind of a ability that I'm no more responsible for than I am my male pattern baldness or my brown eyes. So I was given that. I have spent 30 years really working on it and applying that brain in different places. And I'd love to say that this is a master plan that I started in my teens, and 40 years later, it has been beautiful and perfectly, this plan has come to place, but absolutely positively, all over the place. So all kinds of ups and downs. And I can see now, looking back, how so many of the experiences that happened all gave me skills, abilities, experiences, resilience, something that I can call upon now. But holy shit, there's no way I thought that was the case in the middle of it. I mean, no way. So that whole, when do you get knocked down? If I look back over, whether it's, parents divorce, bullying, um, sports career ending, injuries, marriage, divorce, kicked out of companies I started, near bankruptcy, borderline, semi-suicidal, losing friends, losing parents, losing siblings, losing, everybody has these things in their life. And I guess if you add them all up, it's like, oh, that's not so good. But everybody has these things. And so it really is some of, how do you just get up and keep moving? And I did lose my father from cancer. My mother is still battling stage 4 cancer, but she has the best attitude in the world. And I remember watching her as a kid, got divorced, didn't really want to be divorced, broke, working 3 jobs, trying to do anything she could to go back to school, take care of her kids. It was somebody who, she never complained, despite the fact that her parents weren't great to her. My dad wasn't great. My stepdad came in later, was wonderful, and then he died unexpectedly in his early 40s. Like this, this wonderful woman was dealt such a hand, and really never complained, just moved on. So I think some of that was, I don't know, as a kid I was that aware of that, but some of that is you see it and you just keep moving. So I think for me, a lot of it is, I don't get too caught up in it. At least I try not to, though. If I look back, there were certain breakups or legal battles or things that happened that I might have sat in for a while. When I wrote the book, Be the Giraffe, which we're going to talk about, I'm sure, one of the chapters is You Will Survive the Drop. And the book, Be the Giraffe, it's a transformational book. It's a business book. It's a life book. It's a money book. But what it is, it's all those things deep down, but on the surface, it's 14 really interesting stories about giraffes. And then how do you take that story and apply it in your personal life? And then there's another layer in each chapter, which is how do you apply it in business? So for the specific question Kim asked about getting knocked down, let's think about the giraffe and the gestation period. So a giraffe is pregnant for 15 months. Normally, the bigger the animal, the longer the longer the pregnancy. So giraffe, pretty big, 2,500, 3,000 pounds, or 1,000 kilos, 1,200 kilos. 15 months. And so this baby giraffe is sitting there in utero, very warm, folded up, dark, pretty good sleeping conditions. Labor is 30 minutes. So you go from 15 months of knowing something to, half an hour of shaking the hell out of you. And then giraffes give birth standing up. So then you don't literally get shot out the back, but you do drop. And so this giraffe goes from 15 months of experiencing something to some uncertainty in a short amount of time, and then a very abrupt change. I mean, a very abrupt change. About 6 months ago, I actually fell out of bed as an adult. As a 53-year-old man, I was not drinking. There was no substances involved. I just happened to be asleep and I rolled out of bed. And I think that's the closest I'll ever come to time travel, because I hit the ground and I had no idea where I was. I mean, the hitting the ground, no idea where I was. And so a baby giraffe starts with that. You start with, I don't know what light is. I don't know what I am. I certainly don't know what the concept of a mother is. I don't know what gravity is, but I just felt it. So you get to experience the falling, the light, the shock, the change all at once. Giraffe hits the ground. And what every giraffe has to do is get up. And it has to get up. It can't be told to get up. It can't be shown how to get up. And it's never gotten up before. So that lesson about you will survive the drop is every giraffe is met with a very abrupt, uncertain, uncomfortable, uneasy, unexplainable event to start their life. And then what they have to do is get up and figure it out. And so the takeaway there seems pretty obvious in personal lives is we don't know what it looks like, but that step is getting up.
And I want to know what makes me like a giraffe, right? Because that's a big leap. That was some deep pondering by Chris.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that went into finding this, and there's 14 chapters, 14 visions. There's so many different things that go into this. And when I was looking for a logo and an image, God, 20 years ago, figuring out branding, I couldn't figure out what I was. Am I a management consultant? Am I a tax consultant? Am I a financial guru? Am I a coach? Am I a rabbi, a priest? I don't know. I mean, depending on the day, I could be any number of those things in solving problems. So I really couldn't find a thing. And I probably spent way too much of my life. Well, I definitely spent way too much of my life trying to figure out how to categorize myself, as opposed to embracing just the fact that I'm different. And, whether it was
We
therapy and trying to figure out which parent to blame for which event. I mean, I went through all of those, all of those paths that are pretty common. Which all, interestingly, all those paths were, my dad and I used to hike all the national parks in the, well, not all, but we hiked probably half of them. We liked loops, because the loop never had you come back to, you never had to backtrack and go over the same thing. So the whole journey was new. And interestingly, all these paths in life for me all came back to me. So there was no salvation from blame it on mom, blame it on dad, blame it on, there wasn't any of that. So it all came back to me. And as I get into this whole giraffe, it was things like the pattern of the giraffe is just like a fingerprint on a human being. There are no two that are alike. There's the giraffes is the only animal that has evolved to become more vulnerable, not less vulnerable. So the neck is the part of every animal that's a prey animal that it tries to protect from predators. Some have shells, some have quills, some have camouflage, so you can't tell the difference where one animal starts and another one ends. Some can climb trees, some can burrow. The giraffe can't do any of those things. At 6 meters tall, it's not hiding, it's not climbing, it's not burrowing. It's out there in the open, and it has this giant neck to be asphyxiated by lions, and somehow it can see things others can't and reach things others won't. So it was this really fascinating experience for me, that with whatever self-esteem issues I had, I felt that I had to prove how smart I was to everybody. And it was when I went from trying to be the smartest speaker ever to take the stage to becoming the most vulnerable speaker on the stage, is when everything took off. I mean, the
I love that.
relatability, the response, through the roof. And when you read this book, I have friends that I know very well. I have family members. I have business partners. I have people who know me really, really well, who come back and say, I did not know that story about your mother, your father, your business partner, Matt Criglio, this lawsuit, that thing, this event in your life, this. It's like, well, because I don't sit there and go over all the bad things. They just didn't know. And I can't claim to be the giraffe guy and then, only talk about the successes. There's something about the feelings and the insecurities and that's the relatable piece that allows people to, to relate, and then to feel that your lessons might apply to them, when most interviews are about all the wonderful things you did and all the money you've made and the companies you've sold and the 18 books you've written. And it's like, yeah, but if I only talk to people who've written 18 or more books, it'd be a real small group. I mean, nobody buying the 19th book. I mean, none. It'll be like 6 people. So what's I mean, more than 6, but it's more about the life stuff that's so much more important. So for me, this giraffe thing, it just kept coming back over and over and over and over again. And the more I learned about the giraffes, which I've seen in the wild and I've seen in zoos and I've worked with trainers and dove really deep into it, every time I found something else, I was like, oh my God, that's great. Oh wait, that's great. And these things just kept coming. And there's a lot of good transformational books. There's a lot of good life advice. And as you know, we've talked about this before, sometimes the message just comes at a time when you're ready to hear it. There's the saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Sometimes people will tell you the same thing, but that you just happen to hear it a certain way or on a certain day, or the light was going a certain way, or Mercury was in retrograde, or Freddie Mercury was in retrograde during Pride Month, or whatever it was. There's something's going on that happened that makes it click. And what I really liked about Be the Giraffe was when you have a visual, now the stories, there's something you can attach it to. It's not just some lesson and some cute words and some when the tough, when the times get tough, tough get going, or whatever the cliche is, there's something to the giraffe thing is more vivid. You won't forget the giraffe birth. And if you pull it up on YouTube, you'll watch it, then you definitely won't forget it. There's no way once you see it that you can unsee it. So I find that for people, I'm hopeful that with the book that the lessons will have there's a visual. Just yesterday, I had a client hand me a giraffe that they had a statue in their house. They were cleaning things out and said, "Here, this is for you." And it's like, oh, okay, great. I have like 75 of them in my house, everything from hand carved stuff in Namibia to photos people have taken. People just send me stuff all the time, and some of it's behind me, and some of it's some of it's art, some of it's
It
less
makes me
artful.
curious. Tell me, have you actually spent time with a real giraffe in their wild?
Yeah, I have in Africa. Yep.
Yeah,
I mean, you
wow.
can't walk with them because like it's not safe. But I mean, the legs are taller than I am, and I'm 6'3", so that puts me at what 1.9 meters or whatever that is. So 195. So I mean, you can't walk around, you can't ride them. Like that's not safe. So, I mean, but we have followed them around. I've watched the mating ritual. I've watched the fighting ritual. I've seen, there's something about the mating ritual that's in chapter 13, which is titled Taste the Pea. So that'll be, irreverence is not something I'm afraid of, but that's, we can get into, that one, I guess, since it's there, something called the Fleming's response, which is giraffes can tell when other giraffes are in heat by they rub the cheek to cheek, but it's the face cheek to the butt cheek, which then causes the female to urinate or release some fluid. They catch it on the lip, and then they can tell the hormone whether or not the female is in estrus, and so they know that mating could, at least you can attempt the courting process, but you wouldn't want to attempt the courting without knowing that they could actually conceive, because otherwise that's not natural selection. So so they actually have a process for this. And so the application in that is giraffes they actually have a chemical way to tell when something's a good decision and something's not a good decision. And how many of us kind of wing it, or we have we have rules about how we're going to operate, or we're going to date, or we're going to socialize, or we're going to diet, or we're going to exercise, or we're going to whatever it is, and then we get a feeling, and we deviate from that, from that set rule, which oftentimes does not give us the response we want. And so some of this is, what are the things that actually matter to you, and can you set some discipline and find a way to guide you in your decisions on. I know for me in business, I have relaxed my requirements many times because I thought the money was just too good. It was too big an opportunity, so I'm gonna relax my rule on taking money up front, or doing things a certain way, or not working with certain types of people, or whatever it was. And every single time that I've done this, well, before I tell you my answer, I talked to 25 of my clients, very wealthy people, and I asked them if they'd ever sacrificed their rules, their guidelines for money for a deal. And out of the 25, I think 20 said they had. And when I said, what happened? Every single person said the same two things happened when they relaxed their guidelines in a deal for money. One, the money was never as much as they thought. And two, the sacrifice was way more than they ever could have feared. So whenever they did something for money, they made a sacrifice for money. The money was never what they thought, was never enough, and the sacrifice was always way too much.
I'm so glad that you just brought that up, Chris, because one of the things about David Meltzer's forward for your book and your experience as a specialist in the money issues for extremely wealthy people, in all the work that you do for family offices, because my husband is also a super fancy tax lawyer like you are, I've been privy to some of the stories that we can't even fathom as average or normal people in real life. It's not a world that we circulate in, and we don't even know that it exists, actually. And you can't really, it's like you're oblivious, but it's not your fault. It's just not where you have been exposed.
Sure.
And so people who are outside that world wonder if the person who's made a fortune and lost a fortune, or the equivalence thereof, percentages thereof, the analogy is the important part. It's not that you're then in retrospect, anti-money or against more fortunes in the future. Tell me what the perspective is on money where you sit, and what are we going to learn in the book?
Yeah. So in the book, in one of the opening chapters, I introduced the wild factor, which we've talked about, Kim. The wild factor is I guess we'll call it a personality test for lack of a better term. I spent, I don't know, 2 years, maybe $250,000 or more building out this quiz and trying to make it short, impactful, memorable, and make it the most valuable personality test I could find. Because I took all the personality tests when I was on that journey trying to find myself and find reasons and explanations, and as opposed to just accepting who I was. So I tried them all. I mean, all of them, but many of them. And I really didn't like any of them as far as, can I use these to teach and help people figure out what they're doing? And what I also realized was that there's a huge difference between information and transformation. Information is giving people some information, but transformation is actually helping them change their lives, which is a way different experience, right? Information versus transformation. So I built this assessment, the wild factor, with 20 questions. And everybody who's watching will put in the notes how to get it for free, save you $20 US. But with those 20 questions, it'll take you 4 minutes. And there'll be questions about health, finances, career, relationships, and fun. And then based on those scores, you'll be an eagle, an elephant, a monkey, a dolphin, a penguin. Again, animal, something that's visual. So you would imagine the monkey is fun and the eagle is money, and penguin is relationships. And anyway, so you get the point. And so what I did with that quiz, what's really valuable is that when people take the quiz, they realize where their scores are. And the high score is that dominant voice in your head, the thing that you cannot ignore. Doesn't mean it's the thing you care the most about. It's the thing you can't ignore. And so when I did this the first time, I've had maybe 5,000 people take this. And when I did it at a seminar, I remember doing it and people loved it and said, oh, I met that guy, he's a dolphin and she's a penguin and that one's a monkey and this one's an eagle. And it was a wonderful response. Final dinner, I'm sitting at the table with the CEO, the president of the company, a couple high, executives and spouses. I'm with my wife, and there's a woman across the table, and Monica. And I remember asking her, "What do you think of the quiz?" And she said, "I think your quiz is shit. I'm not an eagle. I'm a people person. Everybody knows that you got to redo your test." It's like, wow, well, that's not how I expected this to end. And at the moment, I was curious and said, well, why do you think that? And she was forthcoming and asked some questions. And then I asked her, where did you grow up? She said that she grew up in the south of Texas, relatively close to the Mexico border. And she said her parents were the first generation to come over. And I asked her if she grew up wealthy, and she laughed, said, no, I had 5, 6 siblings, and we lived in a double wide trailer, and it was very poor. And I said, when was the last time you made a decision without considering what you could use the money for? And she said, the next time will be the first. I'm very frugal with the things that I spend money on. Money's not important to me, but I don't spend it freely. So I asked, well, what if instead of saying money is the most important thing in your life, I said money is something that you can never ignore how much something is, and it's that voice in your head always telling, reminding you that you didn't have money as a kid. And she's like, oh no, that fits. And I completely changed the whole assessment after that bit of feedback, that the score that's your highest is the dominant voice in your head that will always chime in on every decision you make. Doesn't mean it always wins, but it definitely has a voice. And conversely, your score that's 5th is when push comes to shove, what will you sacrifice? So when you don't have time, which every successful person I know wishes for more time. I don't know anybody who's, other than terminal illness and sick for years and wanting to be done, everybody wants more time to do more things. So when you don't have enough time, what do you sacrifice? Do you sacrifice yourself? Do you throw money at problems? Do you sacrifice a relationship? Do you sacrifice your career? Do you sacrifice fun? Like, what's that thing that when push comes to shove, you give it up? And that's the thing that that's your endangered theses, if you will. It's the thing that you just, constantly give into. And so once you realize the patterns, this wild factor is, as far as I know, is the only personality test that's about behaviors. It's not about preferences. Because we can all say, I'd rather be outside, I'd rather be with people, I'd rather be whatever it is, but what are you actually doing on a day-to-day basis? So with Be the Giraffe, it really starts with the context of what am I doing? What am I sacrificing? What's the dominant voice in my head? And can I just be aware of how I make decisions and how I make sacrifices so that the next time something comes up, I can stop and just ask myself, am I sure I want to do that? Or should I be thinking about something a little differently? So it starts with that. Where am I? Where are my sacrifices? What are my natural tendencies? If somebody's taking this quiz and reading this book, they're not getting everything they want out of their life. So they need to adjust something, but they don't know what. And the problem with so many people online is everybody has a gimmick. Do this thing and you'll make a bunch of money. Do this thing and you'll have a funnel, or you'll get more people, more speeches, more this, more coaching clients, more. Well, how do you know that that's good for them? Like, that's good if that's what they need. Getting more speeches for me, if I'm trying to work on my health, being on the road 20 days a month is not going to help me get healthy unless I decide to Forrest Gump it and run from city to city. But that's, like, I'm not going to be healthy if I'm on the road all the time. So just because you're booking something doesn't mean that it's healthy for you. And
Oh, yes, it's so interesting, because the largest amount of money I was ever offered was like 87 million US dollars to give up around about 92% of positive prime, sell the company and the idea to somebody who could scale it. It happened to be Bill Gothy and Greg Renker from Gothy Renker, who was behind Tony Robbins, and they have a private equity firm, and we'd spent 8 months in negotiations, and we thought it was just like everything you could ever want, more money than I could have ever dreamed of. And yet, actually, at the end of the day, whether it was, and there's an interesting part of me that thinks it's such deep conditioning, did I sabotage it unconsciously, or was I being conscious about the fact that one of the conditions was I had to live in Southern California? And if you come to our home, where Cameron and I live in harmony and in love and amongst nature, and you have fresh air and space and time, would you give that up? Right? And then
sure.
the amount of judgment from people about, oh, you should have done that, because then millions and millions of people would be using this thing that you created. And I was like, well, if that's what God wants, it's going to happen anyway. It might not happen in my timeline, but it's going to happen. So
Sure.
you and I, we have this beautiful responsibility to help people who've never been fathoming that amounts of money to understand that actually money might not be the solution, and it might not be what you need in order to solve the problems, whatever they are. So can you dive into that a bit more deeply?
Yeah. Well, so you get a score from 1 to 20 in each of the 5 areas, and then unsurprisingly, it adds up to 100 because I know how people are with their grades. So, but one of the big challenges is we can measure money rather easily from country to country. There's exchange rates. It's not that hard, but you don't measure. I mean, health, you can measure blood pressure and you can measure, heart rate and body fat and things, but we're not running around doing that to other people. How do you measure fun? How do you measure personal relationships? How do you measure happiness? It's really difficult. So when I created the wow factor, I created a quantifiable system. So you might get,
I love the actuary in you.
yeah,
You're not running away.
yeah, 15 in finance and 13 in career and 12 in health and 8 in relationships and 6 in fun. Then the beauty of that is, for anybody who's in coaching, if you're in coaching or consulting and you have someone take the wild factor, and then after 6 months, 9 months, 2 years, 5 years, they say, I don't think I'm getting anything out of this. And I have my clients take the wild factor year after year and see where they are and see, have we actually done anything to change your behaviors in a certain way? And it's really important to have something you can measure so you can see whether or not you're actually whether you're doing it for yourself or you're doing it for the people that you're trying to guide, lead, help, work with, whatever it is. And the other thing about the wow factor that was I didn't set out to do this, but it happened, was when you realize those 5 areas of your life: finances, health, career, relationship, fun. I have yet to find the thing that improves all areas of your life. So, and even health is, there's physical health, there's mental health, there's spiritual health. With relationships, there's relationships with all the different people. So the time you're spending with one person, you're not spending with the other people. So relationship is a zero-sum game. Like the time you spend, it's very, the people you're with, you're not with the other 7 billion people on the planet. So people are so caught up with FOMO and they're stuck on their phones. And I mean, I happen to measure my best days at work. I found out over the last 6 months were the days that I didn't turn on my computer once. I just had live and phone meetings, didn't turn it on. And I got a lot done, because as you sit there and try and plan and scheme and build and write, and I'm a writer too. It's like, all right, this doesn't work. I need to have this. I need to have feedback and conversation and find out what people need. And it goes way further than just guessing. And so back to this FOMO thing, when you realize that there's billions of things that you could be doing other than the thing that you are doing, then you have to embrace. People say be present, but I don't think that most people know what being present really means. I know you had it in your opening comments, but when you realize that everything in your life, health, finances, career, relationship, fun, things that you're doing are not helping other areas of your life, then when you realize there's so many things you're not doing all the time, it becomes so much easier to enjoy the thing you are doing. And I spent most of my life thinking about the next thing and not enjoying the thing that I did. But when I had my friend Chris Cato, who was my friend in 5th and 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade, then we were friends in college, then I hadn't seen him for 30 years. He was in town for work and said, "Hey, can we get a cup of coffee?" I was like, "Cup of coffee? You were my best friend. Like, I'm going to pick you up at the airport. You're going to stay at my house. We're going to drink way too much. We're going to stay up all night. And then you're going to go to your conference. And, we're both going to suffer for a couple of days, but it's going to be worth it." And that's exactly what we did. And so we had this wonderful evening that was great for both of us to reconnect and have fun, but it certainly wasn't physically good for either one of us. And, and it wasn't good for work because I couldn't get much work done for a couple of days, but it did something for me. And I'm not suggesting that that's the right path, but the event is, sometimes you do things, you need to get away, you need to unplug, you need to go see a sibling, see a parent, see an aging parent, spend time with your spouse, your loved one, or you just need to go work out, whatever that thing is. That's part of the contribution. And there's a chapter in Be the Giraffe. One of the ones is balance is bullshit. And there's no such thing as balance. Everybody says life balance, and I'm telling you, it's bullshit. There's no such thing as life balance. You will not have balance in your life on any one day. You will have balance over time. If you want to accomplish anything great, you have to make a sacrifice. If you want to get in the best shape of your life, you're going to have to get up early, not go out late with your friends, not go out for the food that you might normally eat. Like, you're going to have to make a sacrifice. If you want to sell your company, you're going to have to dig down, really build it, do some work, clean it up. It's going to be less time to work out, less time for fun, less time for travel. So any great thing requires some sacrifice. So over a period of a year, you could have better health, make more money, build your career, see some people, build some relationships, but you can't be measuring that stuff in days and weeks. You have to measure that over long periods of time, because life happens. You can have a great plan, and then what happens if your kid gets sick? What happens if you get sick? What happens if your parent gets really sick? What happens you get stuck in an airport? Like, things happen in life all the time. So if you measure balance over a really long time, then things can work out really well. The giraffe story behind balance is bullshit is the giraffe's front legs are longer than the back legs, and the knees bend in because it has this huge neck and all this weight in the front. It's top heavy and way front heavy. So the job of the front legs is to keep the giraffe from falling over. Like, that's what it does, because naturally the giraffe leans and keeps moving forward, which is another metaphor for life, right? So you got to keep moving. And so this whole balance thing is you can achieve a balance of success, but you're not going to have a day. You're very unlikely to have many days in your life that's good at all those things. It's just not like it, right? The day that you decompress and you go to the concert you always wanted to go to and you see your friends and have fun, like, you paid good money for those tickets. You didn't make money. You're not performing, right? So some of this really valuable in the Be the Giraffe piece that I think is so important in anything. I always start with that wow factor, by the way, every conference I do, every lecture I give, virtual or live. I will blow 10 minutes in the beginning saying, take this, and when you're done, look up and we'll go from there. But because I want to create context and say, what is it that you decided in your life you'd like to be better? Now, whatever crap comes out of my mouth, you should be asking yourself, can I use that to apply to an area of my life that I would like to improve? Make it about you, not make it about the funnel, the podcast guest, the podcast yourself, the newsletter, who cares? I mean, unless that thing is getting you to an end that matters for you. Like that personalization, that contextualization is so important. And right now we get bombarded with messages. And I mean, Christ, if you go online, people are selling thousands of things that you could do. And I fall into it. I see somebody, I'm like, if that nitwit can make $1 million a year, like that guy's a fool. Like I can do that. I mean, it's easy to fall into that, but the question is, do I want to? Like, do I want to be that fool? You know, or do the, you know, what does that do for me? So, you know, I'm running into a situation where I wrote a book that I think might sell 1 million copies, but I don't want to travel all over the world speaking about it because it doesn't fit my, you know, I don't want to run around like crazy to do that. So I'm going to work with friends of mine like Kim and people who have reach, and I'll put it out there. And then when people they know want to put it in front of more people, it'll happen. I mean, I'm going to put myself out there a little bit, but I'm not going to kill myself just so some newspaper can say that my book was great. You know, I'm more interested in having people say, I read this and it changed my life, and or this helped me look at something differently so that I could then do the things I needed to do, at least with some context, instead of bouncing from what I hope is some magic bullet to a magic panacea to a, you know, whatever it is, looking for that thing. Let's try to at least embrace it. So,
Do you know, I really want to pick up on that point, Chris, because when I started to read the book, and I'm lucky I got an advanced gift copy, it's solid. And everybody in my community knows I care about whether it works. Like, you can't claim that you've created something that changes brainwaves and that's necessary to facilitate more elegant and more rapid and more enduring transformation if that's BS. But I was really disciplined and diligent and tenacious about what Positive Prime offers and what's the promise and proving it, right? And so I kind of have a little bit of a allergy to some of the gurus out there who claim that they've achieved X, Y, or Z. And actually, as I've gotten to know them and I've scratched the surface, they don't pass the sniff test. They're actually really incongruent, and they haven't achieved what they present to the world is their story. And that's not fair. It never was, but it's really not fair now. I kind of think in this very visual world where, you know, people who may not be good for humanity or other people's souls present themselves as influencers. And I think, goodness me. So you actually have this very calm and confident way of sharing a message because they're tried and tested and true, right? It's just, it's reliable.
As best I know. I mean, some of it, some of it just came to me. Some of it is luck. Some of it is, I stumbled on some of it, but I did keep moving, and I kept moving. I met a lot of people. I asked a lot of questions, and I listened to the answers. I mean, I have the benefit of being an auditory learner, so if I hear something, I don't forget it. That helps. But asking questions and actually caring about the response it's kind of important. And we were I was working with a company literally yesterday. We flew out, private jet company wanted me to go talk to one of their clients who wants to buy a plane and was looking for find ways to save money. And so I went with them, and, you know, we got in the Uber and I started chatting with the driver as opposed to chatting with the people I was there with. And we just had a conversation. And one of the people who was there, who met me for the second time, we got out and he asked, have you ever met a stranger? And I was like, not yet. But that's the, something about humans is we're all in this thing together. And I don't know where I got this from, but we're on this Zoom right now, and all of our lives all equal the same thing. Somebody's bio might be longer, somebody's bank account might be longer, somebody might be older, younger. But really, if the world came to an end, like we're all together now having this experience together. And so our paths have all met at this point. Where the path was before really doesn't matter. So embracing that idea that when you're with somebody, there's some reason for it, that after a year of meditating every day, I can honestly say my life has changed dramatically and my outlook is much cooler and calmer and easygoing, in that if it's meant to happen, it'll happen. And I mean, I'll make effort. I still work hard, but I'm not detached, but I'm not attached to outcomes. I'm just, I'm interested, but at ease with whatever's going to happen. And that whole being interested in people and just not knowing what the path is and why you met and what's there is something special to just asking questions. And for my business, when I got out of the lab and started getting out live, that's why I call this office my lab, because you can't see all the whiteboards and all the mess on the other side of the camera. But it's like, get out of the lab and stop scheming and trying to figure out what everybody's going to buy and like, and just go talk to people, that you get all the answers you need and you get all the referrals you have. And I've queued up 34 new referral possibilities in the last 3 months for clients with 6 and 7 figure revenues. I mean, just from having, like, I can't handle them all, but that just came from a couple of months of talking to people and letting people know what I do. So some of it is putting the energy out there, but those things weren't going to show up in the mailbox or the email box. Don't trust anything in the email box, but so I think part of that is the easygoing is just having conversations and treating people like people. And when you ask a lot of questions, I mean, yes, I've seen a lot of things, so maybe I have a little more context in business to ask some questions to get to some interesting points, but we're all people. We spend our whole lives talking to people, unless you were, a hermit.
Do.
So,
hey, super quick, are you an extrovert or an introvert?
Extrovert.
I imagine
I could do this all day. Like
okay,
20 hours, no problem, easy, happy to do it.
The introvert in this conversation doesn't want to stick her neck out. I couldn't think of anything more scary, right? I like to fly under the radar. So I look at Be the Giraffe and I think to myself, oh, I really like what Chris says, but that's not me. I don't want to stand above everybody else and see. And I know I'm different. Like, I've done the tests. I am a polymath like you are, right? Like most of the listeners. Maybe 20 years ago, we didn't even know that there was such a thing as a polymath. And in this day and age, given our access to everything in the world simultaneously, the reality is some of us are actually more aware of being an introvert or an extrovert. And so I look, and I'm gonna screen share for everyone to show you the creation process for Chris's Positive Prime, which is, of course, based on the summary of his book. Allow yourself to be seen. But for somebody who doesn't want to be an influencer, I want you to help the audience to interpret what that means, particularly for the introverts amongst us.
Yeah. So think about this. So the giraffe, if you know, I spent my childhood watching nature shows with my father. It was one of the things that we really did. And when I started my first company in my mid to late 20s, and I finally started to make money in my early 30s, I took him to Africa. And so we went on a photo safari. We didn't kill anything. We're not hunters. It was just photo. It was a wonderful experience. And what I realized, we talk in the book in Giraffe Money Essentials that I wrote with Tony Asadi. We talk about giraffes and we talk about zebra. Now, whether they're zebra or wildebeest, they're migrating herd animals. And so they follow the reins. And when the herd moves, everybody moves. So when you're part of the herd, you get what everybody gets in front of you. You literally live with your head in the weeds. And when you lift your head up, all you really see is the ass in front of you. Like, that's what you got. But when you're a giraffe, Giraffes don't eat grass, they eat leaves. And trees grow roots as deep as the tree is tall. Grass, if there's no rain, the grass will die. You have to have water within the first inch or two of the soil for grass to grow. But for a tree, you could have trees growing in the desert because there's water 10 feet underneath, but it's not getting anywhere near the soil. So as a result, giraffes don't need to migrate with millions of people. They don't. So everybody's so worried about fitting in this I have a line in the book that everybody wants to be an outlier. They want to have more money than everybody else, but they don't want to be an outcast. So I want to have more money than the rest of you, but I want to be one of the guys. I want to be seen like I'm one of you. I just want to end up with a whole lot more shit when I'm done. And like, you don't get to be like everybody else and have a whole lot more stuff. If you're going to have a whole lot more stuff, you need to be different. And so your question about extrovert, introvert is people are so worried about fitting in, but when you fit in, you get what everybody else gets. And so with that fear of being seen, the giraffe can see paths because its head is up. It sees paths others can't. It goes places other people aren't, other animals aren't. So that's one of the chapters is break free from the herd, is avoid the masses and the asses. It's get away from what everybody else is doing and figure out what you want to do. There's probably no crime, nothing sadder in life than living it out. And like, you can still fail at doing something you don't love.
Yeah.
Why would you want to spend your
true.
whole life being somebody you're not? And so that whole be who you are, it's not about being seen that you beat your chest and you want everybody to look at you. It's just don't be seen as something you're not. Like, that's the worst thing, because then there's expectations of you, and so be the person you are, the introvert, the whatever that is, and lean into that. What I learned in so much of my career was that the things that I hid, my parents were divorced. My dad had been a professional athlete before they made any money, but then became a security guard. Like, he had coached baseball and then became a security guard. My parents didn't go to college. And then I went to a state school. I didn't go to an Ivy League school, though I was smart enough. I didn't have any money, didn't go. And so I was always hiding all these things about my life as if it was more important to say I had gone to Harvard or gone to Yale or I had worked at Goldman Sachs. And when it turned out, what I found later was when I shared all the things that I was ashamed of, those were things that actually made people more relatable, and they made my accomplishments actually more impressive. Because being the rich kid who went to the Ivy League school and had all the opportunities, the fact that you did well, no shit. If you didn't do well, that would be embarrassing. So, but I found that the things that I was afraid of sharing were the things that brought me closer to people. And so it was, I had a transgender sister long before that was cool. Not that it's cool with everybody, but it was not accepted at all then. She was ridiculed, mocked, and over medicated to death by the healthcare system. But those are things that I share because it's what it is. I got kicked out of a company I started, and then I was borderline suicidal, and I thought about jumping out of a window, and I thought I'm only going to hurt myself. Like, I couldn't even pull this off right now. And so, like, you have these moments, and so where I'm going with that vulnerability thing too is you want to be seen for who you are, and you'll attract people who like the things that you do. I'm in the finance space. I live in Texas in the United States. Most people would think, with the skinhead type haircut and the fact that I'm in Texas and I'm a white male, that I would be a very conservative, hunter, Christian, God-fearing, right-wing person. And it's like, I'm the left-wing liberal with the transgender sister who's works in education and does stuff to help underprivileged people in rural communities. And I'm not that guy, and I've never shot anything. So I'm not what it looks like, but I share that I don't hide with clients and say, oh no, I'm a Christian, I go to this church, and I don't tell them the thing that people think I want to say or they want me to say. I tell them the truth, and then we talk about beliefs versus values, and we move on, and then we find it, and we have interesting conversations, then we move on. So other people who try to introduce me to those networks say, well, can you just hide the fact that I'm a pagan? Like, what am I hiding exactly? I don't have a problem with religion. I think it's fine. I just don't happen to subscribe to a big group of anybody believing in anything. So, it's my natural tendency to be in a room, and if everybody had a baseball hat on and I had a baseball hat on, I would take mine off. I mean, I truly would do that. It bugs me to
So
sit at the table.
can I just ask, did you ever identify yourself as contrarian and that's part of your magic?
Of course.
No. You
Absolutely.
see
No,
this case?
I'm absolutely contrarian. There's Like I have 7 brand words and one of them is disruptor. So there is no doubt if you give me an opportunity to disrupt an industry, not even one that I care about, I'm interested. Like I know that that's my natural. Yes, I am truly a contrarian. I don't have a problem with that's the I guess that's the only group that I would associate with be the contrarians.
I love
But
it.
I'm open to dialogue and and I'm okay with whatever the perspective. If you haven't changed your mind, why do you have one? So I like the fact that I was in my 20s living in Boston, Massachusetts, and William Weld was the attorney general. He was running for governor, and they called him a turncoat because he changed his opinion on capital punishment. And they just said, "You're not consistent." And he said, "I did change my opinion, and I'm going to tell you why." Oh, when he was going from governor to the Senate, and he said, "When I was there, I believed in capital punishment, but while I was there, I found that when there was a defendant who was white, they got the death penalty 7% of the time. And if the defendant was black, they got it 47% of the time." And so he said, "I believe in the rule, but since I can't trust the application, I can't trust the law." And I was like, wow, okay. Like I'm with you. Like that's like, here's somebody with information and that makes sense. And so yeah, I am a contrarian, but I do have, I'm definitely a contrarian. And I think that whole being seen, it's worse to be put into a group that you don't belong in. And I think right now, especially politics in the United States, and I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but certainly if you think about, I'm a huge fan and avid reader of Roman history, and I love the city of Rome. It's my favorite city in the world, and been there many times, and I love everything Roman Empire. And like this whole distracting people with the games and with other things and trying to keep people focused on something that isn't them, real common. I mean, it's really very much like what's going on right now. And they try to push people into you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're red, you're blue, you're conservative, you're liberal. And the truth is, I really believe 80-90% of people share the same values. Most people share the same values. I mean, the values are the same. They value hard work, they value caring, they value discipline, they value family, they value, you know, social programs to help people who can't help themselves. Like this, for the most part, people value, I think, the same things. And but this whole getting herded literally into these groups, I would think for the introvert, maybe it's easy to feel. I think we all have this desire to build. I don't necessarily as much, but people they want to fit in somewhere and they want to be part of something, so they just lean and they just get accepted. But then in this attempt to be accepted, you lose your individuality, which to me, that was my greatest fear as a kid, the whole individuality, this not being yourself. And that just sucks, like losing your freedom, your individuality. So for me, I think for the introverts, good God, like the Giraffe story is your story. Go do your thing, leave the herd, find your place. There's a chapter called Be a Nomad, but Never Be Alone. When innovators do their thing, nobody thinks it's a good idea. I mean, Bezos has countless stories of people telling him he's nuts. I know people who were in some of the original Amazon pitches who told me stories about the guy, and they were ready to write checks and said, "This guy's the best speaker. He's brilliant. He's fantastic. I'm going to write it. This guy's going to change the way people do books. It's worth it. It's a great win." And then he said, "Oh, by the way, when I'm done selling books, we're going to sell everything to everyone." And these guys closed their checkbooks and said, "This guy's fucking nuts." And so, like, people who are innovators, they do things that most people think are crazy, because if people already thought it was a great idea, someone would have already tried it. So it's the bad ideas that are the ones that are, not every bad idea is going to change the world, but you need to have a bad idea in the eyes of other people to go do something interesting. And then when you go, you leave the herd and you find greener pastures, literally, kind of mixed metaphor, but you go somewhere better, and then people will come and find you, but there'll be people who appreciate the thing that you did. So innovation and entrepreneurship is a super lonely game, like really, really lonely, really, really, really lonely. The CEOs I know that I have as clients and I coach, they're real. I mean, it's a hard gig because you have investors, you have family, you have executives, you have parents, kids, spouses, there's a whole bunch of people you're trying to feed. I joke with when people say, who are your clients? And I say, they're predominantly men, middle age, with 2 nipples and at least 20 people waiting to suckle at any one time. And I describe it that way. And people and friends of mine say, please don't use the suckling thing when you come to this meeting. And I'm like, that's fine. And then I do every time. And every single time that I do, every time I've done this, I've predicted it would happen. And it has happened every time. Somebody raises a hand and says, that's me. That's my life. Like, exactly what I'm going through. So there isn't a suckling thing in the Instagram ad manager. Like, I can't just click that box and say, give me all the people who are tired of being suckled. But it describes the feeling of I'm just overwhelmed with how many people I'm responsible for. And I've lost myself. And that there's this whole being a nomad, never being alone. Just got to do your thing. Innovation is not a democratic process. You have got to take the responsibility, do the thing, go do it. And you're going to leave people who aren't going to like change. You've got to think about this too, that when your parents say, be careful, like I say it to my kids, right? The last thing out the door, be careful. It's like my mother says it to me now. I've flown 2 million miles in my life. And before I got on a plane, she says, be careful. It's not because she doesn't trust me to fly. It's just because she's my mother. And of course, she just wants me to be careful. So people will constantly, in your journey to innovate and do things differently, are going to tell you to be careful, and they're going to be afraid for you. It's not because they don't think you can do it. It's because they don't want you to hurt, but they don't have the same level, the same comfort with change and chance and trying new things. And that's just natural. So the natural, and also think about animals, safety in numbers is built on numbers, right? Everybody stays in the pack, in the herd, and that works for the herd. If the herd disbands, there's no herd and you don't have the safety. So you just have to get used to some of these things. So, I mean, I think entrepreneurship for the introvert is easy, should be easier. Not easier to go meet people and fundraise and inspire people, but if you want to feel lonely, run a company. It's a good way to feel lonely. You'll be around a lot of people, but you'll feel pretty lonely with all that isolating responsibility.
I actually agree entirely.
I'll take
entirely.
it. I have 3 teenagers at home. No one has said that. So I'm so happy to be here because I feel loved and heard and appreciated.
Absolutely. And the funny thing about people who rely on you, people who are suckling, is that the minute that you stand up for yourself is the minute that you hear a lot of dissension.
Sure. But that's all good. I'm going through that right now with people I've done business with, and I didn't have contracts in place for the thing that I was doing. And okay, you've just shown me that you don't value the thing that I did, which means, guess what? You get no more of this. Like, I got a lot going on. Like, it's okay. Like, you shorted me on this transaction or this relationship. You don't think it's worth a lot? I mean, every time somebody gets fired or gets broken up with or divorced or anything like that happens, it's the same word from me every single time. Every time someone tells me, I just got fired, I got kicked out of my company, this happened, I got broke up, we're getting a divorce, I was like, congratulations. It's always congratulations, every time. And I mean it. And people say, wow, everybody else says they're sorry. It's like, I'm not sorry. You just had somebody tell you that they didn't value you. And with 7 billion other people on the planet, like, thank God. Like, you didn't have to make a tough decision. They just told you that they don't value you. So life is way too short to spend any amount of time, any appreciable amount of time with somebody who doesn't appreciate you for you, which goes back to that whole, not just being seen, but being seen as who you are. So you don't want to be rejected. You go to the actuary, type 1 error, type 2 error. So you don't want to reject the true hypothesis, right? So when you like, you just don't be rejected for being who you're not. Like, a really funny example, I was working construction in high school with a guy who was in college. He'd gone to Brown University. He was a huge Beatles fan. But it wasn't cool in the 80s to be a Beatles fan at Brown. It was just too mainstream. So you had to be into REM or U2 or one of the Talking Heads or somebody that was a little less mainstream. So he went on a date with a woman. Somebody asked him what he thought of the Beatles, and he loves the Beatles, but because he didn't want to feel bad, he said, they're okay. The woman he was on his second and last date with was Paul McCartney's daughter. And so now he's not saying that anything else would have happened, but this whole "they're okay," he said it didn't do anything. I never saw her again. And I basically was trying to fit in. But if I had been myself, who knows? Maybe something else would have happened. Maybe I would have met Paul McCartney. Who knows? But maybe he wouldn't have been working construction with me in the summer. But it's who the hell knows? So this Be the Giraffe is about being yourself and just being okay with the fact that you're so different. And it's just getting into that. What is it that matters to you? Why? Figuring reasons how to do things that they fit you. It's such a personal thing, and it's
Chris, can I just get you to differentiate or discern for the audience? You're not actually saying if you're an asshole, you're allowed to stay one because that's who you are and being different, right? Excuse my language, but
no,
I know people who go, accept me as I am, even though I'm the bad version of me. That's not what you're saying, is it?
If that's you, then you should. I'd rather know who you are and what matters to you. Like, what makes somebody an asshole is in somebody else's eyes. Some people call people assholes because they tell it like it is, and they just don't want to hear they don't want to hear the truth. Sometimes they're just mean, and if somebody's mean, I'd like to know that they're mean. Or if somebody's making decisions all about money and they don't care about people, this is a job, it's a company. I don't care about you and your stupid dog and this is what we do. This is how we do it. You show up, you do the work. That's all I care about. Wouldn't you like to know whether your boss values what they value so you can try to work toward making the person who's paying you happy, or go work somewhere else? Like, nothing worse than thinking that you've hit the number or hit whatever the mark was and then have the mark move. Right? That, to me, that's the most frustrating thing. So as long as you're upfront with what it is that matters to you and what you're trying to do and why, then people are going to select to be around people who value the things that they value. Or they can at least appreciate it in some, like, nothing worse than, like, I don't care if you're tough. Some people are tough. Some people are, everybody, there's all different personalities, but if you know who they really are and what matters to them, then I think you can at least authentically interact, to me. So I don't like, we do, my partner Tony's actually on this call. Like, we do have a strict no assholes policy at the firm. Like, it doesn't matter how much money, if someone treats anybody at the company poorly, like, you're out. It's not like you can treat me well, but you can't treat, you can treat the receptionist like crap, or the PA, but you can't treat me that way. No, you just can't treat anybody badly. You have to be a good human being, or we're just not going to work with you. But I think it's just knowing who you are. I think if you knew who you were and you did things that mattered to you, you'd be less of an asshole, because you'd be doing the thing because if you're being an ass, like, people who inflict pain generally are in a lot of pain. I don't know people who are generally I haven't met many people, I'm going to say many, who are just evil. There's some that can be really mean, but that's usually coming from a place of pain. But if they were in a healthier place, maybe they wouldn't be. So I don't know. I don't say you should forgive everybody else.
Thank you. I want to open it up to anybody else who has a question as well, just before we wrap this up for the hour, because you've been listening intently. Tell me, what would you like to know from Chris? Anybody got a question? Have some bravery.
We're going to call on people. It's like business school. It's going to be cold calling. I'll just randomly choose people. Hey, Kate.
Hi.
Katie.
So I was curious, did you say you were going to send us a link to find out if we were a giraffe or a penguin or something?
I am. You know what? I'm actually, let's see, technology. I am going to do that for you right now. And I'll put it in the chat box. So
I'll just say that wild, I have my own definition of it that I use in my work. It's a really, really important word to me. So my ears really perked up when I heard you talk, and I'm just I love the animal connection, and I'm real curious. So I've enjoyed your talk, and thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. I put it in the chat.
And interestingly enough, Chris, when I first met Katie in person, I really did get to understand that she is a giraffe, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Alrighty. So, where and how do we buy your book?
Amazon.com has, it's all on pre-order. The books are ready to go. The book is in Audible, it's in Kindle, and it's in print. The Audible, I think, for the next week until the 18th, the 19th, I think the Audible is down from $15 to $6, $7. There's some 50-60% savings on across the board at Audible right now. So Be the Giraffe, Chris Jarvis, you'll find that. So Audible, Kindle, print, it's all the things are there.
I
And if I can
absolutely
help,
love it.
yeah, I mean, I
Absolutely love
really, it's my 18th book. It is the best thing I've ever written. It's special. I've had some great feedback from people in their 20s and 30s. I've had feedback from people in their 50s. You know, anybody going through change or just feeling a little bit of they're bumping up against something or they're finding something's just not there. It seems to be giving a lot of encouragement and insight. So I love it. I mean, I'm really pleased with it. And I think it's, you know, it's a book I wrote to do something special. I don't have any commercial interest in what this turns into. It's not tied to a series of conferences. It's not tied to, I'm not looking to do personal coaching for 10,000 people. It seems like it's something that I wrote and I was called to write. And unsurprisingly, of the 18 books, 3 of them were written to make the world a better place. 15 were written solely to make money. And the 3 that were written to make the world a better place sold a lot better than the 15. So that'll tell you something. But this one I love. And if you do buy it and you don't really like it, I will buy it back from you. I mean, I really do love this one and I think it's great. And I hope you get something out of it.
I'm absolutely sure that they will. Chris, you've been an amazing person to pop in and out of my life. I've actually gathered so much from our interactions, and I think it's a blessing for everybody who's listened to this. I would encourage you all to go buy the book, dive deep into it, read between the lines as well, and stay connected to listening to, you know, what Chris is doing and how he's doing it and why he's doing it, because I think that there are gems that are still yet to be excavated from you. And I'm excited to see you over the next 5, 10, 15, and 20 years as we traverse this journey and as friends. And so I'm actually really deeply grateful to Brett D. Scott for having the courage to stick his neck out and connect the two of us, and for what you did, especially with connecting us again with Jack Canfield, and for introducing us to David Meltzer and whoever else might actually come by our firesides and we get to play with. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll offer one thing. It's my honor. And I love this. I love it. If anybody has an audience and they want to talk about the book, I'm more than happy to do it. I enjoy it a lot. And hopefully that showed a little bit. And when you go through the book, it was actually Tony who said, you can read the book in probably 2 hours, or if you read quickly like he does, an hour, but then going back and looking at the 14 chapters, take them one a week or take them one a month and just try to do something with that chapter and that lesson. Because if you read 14 lessons, I mean, you can't change 14 things in your life. I mean, it's absurd, right? So find the one that resonates and go back and read that one and then try and change that one. And we all have the one that probably feels the hardest is the one we probably need to dive into. That's the one, you know, the one that the resistance is telling us something. So
Totally.
Again, it really is about seeing things differently, so that if you think differently, you'll see differently. If you see differently, you'll act differently. And when I sign books, oftentimes I sign elevate your perspective, see a better path, be the giraffe. And that's all just looking at yourself and opportunities differently. And if you just take a little different context, it's really hard not to do something a little differently in your life.
Absolutely.
And whatever that changes, you too, like the giraffe, you too will survive the drop.
And see, if you elevate your perspective and see a greater path, you'll be the giraffe. And, you know, I actually do love the way that Positive Prime helps us to remember, really integrate the lessons. And then we on autopilot have our other than consciousness inspired by the lessons that we're learning, and we're having repeated over and over and over and over and over again. Right. So I agree. I actually entirely agree at this stage in my life with all of your wisdom, and I've seen it to be absolutely the truth in my own life and my own entrepreneurial journey. And I'm sure everybody else could as well. So buy the book, and maybe even buy the book for someone who's young and beginning an entrepreneurial path. The world needs entrepreneurs like us, and it is lonely, and you have to have more tenacity and resilience than you could ever have expected you would require. But it is worth it, actually. It really, truly is worth it. And this life is so precious. We've got to do what it is that we were born to do and to contribute. So thank you, Chris.
Kim, thank you.
All righty.
Everybody, thank you for taking time wherever you are.
All righty. Bye-bye, everyone. Much love to you. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.